The morning the wind came down from the hills like a held breath finally released, the town of Red Hollow was already whispering about the rancher, because everyone whispered about him whether they meant to or not, and when the whispers thickened they carried the weight of old grudges, quiet admiration, and the kind of curiosity that grows when a man lives by his own rules. He was known for his silence more than his speech, for the way he fixed fences at dawn and left coins on the counter without waiting for change, and for the way his eyes seemed to look past people as if measuring storms only he could see. And on that morning the storm arrived in the form of a woman named Eliza who stepped off the stagecoach with dust on her boots and resolve in her shoulders, carrying nothing but a small case and a look that told anyone watching that she had crossed something more dangerous than miles to get here. Red Hollow watched her like a play unfolding, and the rancher watched too, from the shadow of the feed store, because he recognized that look, the look of someone who had been told no too many times and decided to arrive anyway. The town had rules, unwritten but enforced, about who belonged and who didn't, about what could be changed and what was sacred, and Eliza's arrival stirred them like a stick through coals, because she had come to reopen the old mill that had burned down years ago and taken livelihoods with it, and people said it was cursed, that it had failed once and would fail again, that dreams didn't get second chances in Red Hollow. The rancher didn't say a word as the council met that evening, didn't raise his hand or clear his throat, and when Eliza stood alone explaining plans drawn on folded paper, explaining jobs, repairs, a future built plank by plank, the room filled with polite smiles and hard refusals, and when the gavel fell it sounded like a door slammed shut. She walked out into the street with her jaw set, and the rancher followed at a distance, because sometimes help arrives quietly and sometimes it waits to see if it's wanted. Days passed and the mill remained a skeleton against the sky, and the town returned to routine, but the rancher changed his routine in small ways that no one noticed at first, like hiring extra hands he didn't need, buying lumber he didn't plan to use, and asking questions that circled back to the mill. And when Eliza came to his ranch to ask for work, not charity, just work, he gave her gloves and a task and said nothing else, and she worked like someone paying a debt to herself, and in the evenings they sat on the porch watching the sun dip into copper and talked about weather and fences and nothing that hurt, until one night the rancher spoke about the fire years ago, how it had started with a spark and ended with blame, how fear had been easier than rebuilding, and Eliza listened, and listening became the bridge between them. The shock came on a day the town had marked for a festival, because festivals were how Red Hollow proved to itself that it was fine, and the rancher arrived late, driving a wagon stacked high with beams and tools, and he stopped in the center of town and did the unthinkable by untying the load and handing out work, not speeches, not promises, but work, and when people hesitated he said he would pay fair wages and guarantee meals, and when the council protested he laid a deed on the table, the mill's deed, signed and transferred, his savings poured into ink and paper, and he said the mill would rise again because he believed in it, and because belief backed by action was louder than any vote. The crowd shifted like a tide unsure which way to go, and then a hammer rang out, then another, and the sound spread until the street echoed with the music of building, and Eliza stood there stunned, hands over her mouth, not because someone had saved her, but because someone had trusted her, and trust is rarer than gold. The town watched the mill climb from memory into matter, watched people who had sworn never again learn to measure and cut and lift together, watched children bring water and elders offer advice, watched old resentments soften under the weight of shared effort, and when the doors finally opened and the first wheel turned, it felt like the town exhaled for the first time in years. That night, under strings of lanterns, Eliza took the small stage and tried to speak but emotion caught her, and when she finally found her voice, she didn't talk about profit or plans, she talked about that feeling, the one that blooms when someone believes in you without asking for anything back, the one that feels like standing taller because the ground beneath you is solid, and she said it was amazing, not because it was easy, but because it was earned together. The rancher stood at the edge of the crowd, hat low, accepting no applause, and the shock settled into something deeper than surprise. It settled into change, because Red Hollow learned that courage could be quiet and generosity could be practical and leadership didn't need a title. As the music played and laughter rose, the rancher finally smiled, and Eliza met his eyes across the light and nodded, a promise without words that the work would continue tomorrow and the day after, because rebuilding is not a moment but a habit. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt that spark of belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when someone chooses to act, then stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and be part of a community that values stories of courage, trust, and transformation, because every subscription helps keep these stories alive and every viewer becomes part of the town that chooses to rebuild together. The mill did not rise in a single triumphant moment but in 1,000 small, exhausting ones, and Chapter 2 of Red Hollow's transformation began the morning after celebration, when lanterns were gone, music was memory, and reality Returned with sore muscles and unanswered questions, Eliza arrived before sunrise, expecting to find doubt creeping back in like cold air through cracks, but instead she found the rancher already there, sleeves rolled, checking measurements as if this work had always been his plan, and that steadiness anchored her when whispers returned, because they always do, voices asking how long the money would last, whether old fears would burn brighter than new hope, whether trusting each other had been a foolish gamble. Progress invited pressure, and the council demanded inspections, paperwork, delays disguised as concern, while some townsfolk worked hard by day and complained by night, afraid that if the mill succeeded it would prove how wrong their years of caution had been. Eliza felt the weight of every beam as if it rested on her shoulders alone, and one evening she finally broke, confessing to the rancher that she was afraid of failing everyone, afraid that the feeling she had spoken about so openly would fade into embarrassment if the mill stalled, and the rancher listened as he always did, then told her failure was not falling short but refusing to stand up again, that towns, like people, only grow when someone risks being talked about. The test came when a supply shipment never arrived, delayed by a decision that smelled too much like sabotage, and work halted, tempers flared, and old sides threatened to reform, but instead of retreating the rancher did something that shifted the balance forever. He opened his own barns, repurposed timber meant for his fences, and told the crew to keep building, because momentum was fragile and fear fed on pauses. That choice spread through Red Hollow faster than gossip, and people who had stayed neutral felt the pull to choose, to either cling to the past or step into something uncertain but alive, and more stepped forward than anyone expected. Weeks later, when inspectors finally returned, they found a mill not only standing but humming, reinforced by hands that now felt ownership instead of obligation. And when approval was granted the town didn't cheer loudly, they stood quietly, absorbing what they had done together. Eliza walked through the mill alone that night, running her fingers along smooth rails, breathing in the scent of fresh wood and effort, and that feeling returned, deeper now, not the rush of surprise but the warmth of earned pride, and when the rancher joined her she thanked him, and he replied that belief was only the spark, but people were the fire. Red Hollow would never be the same after that lesson, because once a town learns it can change, it cannot unlearn it. If this chapter moved you, if you want to see how courage reshapes lives one decision at a time, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because the next chapters are built with the same belief that stories can inspire real change when shared together.